It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Thank you very much for staying with your Feel Good Breakfast Show. It's Expresso. Let's open up to some feel-good conversations here. It's another episode of INGRAMS Skin Sessions. It's a thought-provoking campaign that encourages brave conversations which are more than skin deep. And today we're diving into a brand new topic, time out or burnout. Identifying burnout symptoms, and knowing when to take time out for your mental health, your well-being.
Because it is essential. As much as you're telling yourself right now that you don't need to, you probably do. Burnout is a feeling of exhaustion, maybe frustration, sleep deprivation, helplessness, defeat, or being overwhelmed due to prolonged stress and toxicity. It's when you put so much effort into taking care of everything without enough rest, recognition, or results that we drain ourselves of energy and sap our emotional and our physical wellness. It's all part of the same system. So what happens when a self-care weekend or a week of digital detox just isn't cutting it anymore and time out is not saving you from your burnout? Well, we're joined by comedian, actor and TV personality Mpho pops and life coach Kirsty Melmed today to unpack this topic a little bit further. Even as I did that open, I started to feel tired and a little bit burnt out. It's a tough life we lead, but we've got to suck it up, and that's the notion. I think that so many people just keep repeating over and over, but you need a time out.
Yes. So do we have to suck it up, or do we need the time out before we avoid the burnout?
Well, I mean, that's a two-part thing, because I think, yes, you need the time out. You absolutely need to have a break. You need to have that spa weekend, all of that stuff, just to fill the cup up a little bit.
Yeah.
And you need to look at the bigger picture and go, well, what are these stressors that are constant in my life, and how can I diminish them in some way? Like, how can I make them less?
Yeah, I agree with you. It is two-part in the sense that at some point you do realize that you need it, but most of us don't have the luxury of going, oh, I need it now.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to suck it up until you can. So you can tell yourself, okay, I can afford to take time out in March. So between now and then, let me work towards having the time to...
And maybe that's a good way to frame it.
Yeah.
And our industry is relentless.
Yeah.
There is relevance. So even when you probably don't need to work, you feel that you have to work.
Yeah.
But our next paycheck's not guaranteed, ever. And I think COVID has taught us that. You can feel like you're the most secure individual in the most secure industry. Things can change. How did you know that it was time for you to take a break, and a proper break, not just to kind of tap out momentarily, but actually put a stake down in the sand and recalibrate?
It was a build-up of things. I think I realized early on that I needed time out. But again, I wasn't in a position where I could. I had bookings that I needed to commit to, right? So, again, even though I'm at a point where I'm like, I feel burnt out, I feel tired, I can't keep going, but I have to finish all my commitments and still make time, right?
Yeah.
So I had to get to a point where it was comfortable enough for me to do it. But I think you get to a point where you realize that if I carry on going, I'm gonna break.
Yeah.
Right? Burnout is such a different feeling to just being tired.
Yeah.
You are literally emotionally spent. You are creatively spent. And for someone like me, who's an artist, I rely on that. I rely on my creativity. I rely on. But now you're just like you're cruising through it. We're only as good as our last paycheck, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So your last performance determines your next performances. Right? So you make sure you want to give it your best at all times. So in our industry, you have to be at your best all the time. You can't have an average day. So there's this pressure, this constant pressure that you put on yourself. And at some point, it got too much for me. And I made an arrangement to go to a wellness clinic. But before I went there, I knew I had commitments. But I can tell you honestly, the last few events and gigs I did before I went in were probably the worst, because I loathed my work. I didn't want to be there. I'd be at an event and I'd be like, what am I doing here? I started loathing the thing that I love the most. The thing that you can literally wake me up, my calling. You can wake me up and throw me on stage, I'm good to go. But the last few gigs I did, because I was completely burnt out. I was so despondent. I wasn't present.
No joy.
And then you're no good. To anybody.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Kirsty, we know that there's often a lot of stigma attached to burnout, especially in certain communities. I mean, I can tell you now, and maybe generations as well, my grandmother, for example, I've had to teach her about the concept of burnout because to her, you're lazy. How do we reel our families in towards understanding the need for well-being in that regard?
You know, I think older generations look at these fancy labels that we have for everything now and they kind of like brush it off. But you know, at the end of the day, the generations that came after those generations are all suffering with anxiety and burnout and all these things. So actually, these things do need to be addressed. And so having honest conversations and saying, like, it doesn't matter what it's called, the truth of the matter is I'm not coping and I need to do something to help myself cope. And it's as simple as that. It doesn't matter what I call it, whether you believe in it or not. I'm telling you, I'm not coping and I need help.
How did you have that conversation with your family, with your kids? How did you frame it for them in a way that didn't terrify them, didn't shatter this image of an infallible pillar of strength, because that's what we are as dads, we're unbreakable. How did you frame that with your kids in were you able to do that in a way that was all right for you?
I was. I think I had to come to terms with the fact that I had to be okay with being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to sugarcoat anything, right? Especially my kid is 10 now, and I needed her to understand what I was going through, because I don't know if she might go through something similar at some point in her life. So I'd rather she understood when I was going through it. But I told my family that I wasn't coping. I wasn't coping with the workload. I wasn't coping with the pressure, and that I needed time away to go and reset myself. And I made them understand that it had nothing to do with them. And I was talking to my child here at this point. So my family was very supportive when I told them. And the thing is, when you tell your family, you're expecting them to be like, what are we gonna do? And just to get their support and for them to understand what I was going through, that meant everything to me. So that conversation I had with them and my daughter went a lot smoother than I initially thought in my head.
And Kirsty, do you think that we have been able to distill enough as a society what it means to be in that space? Because just saying, you know, I'm not coping sounds like it's not enough, because everybody's not coping at work. Everybody's got lots of work to do. But how much more defining do we need to be doing in explaining and really expressing what we are going through?
You know, what's going on in the back of my head here is, why do we need to justify our not coping? You know what I mean? Like, why do we have to explain how desperate we are in order to be taken seriously? Can't we simply say, like I said before, I'm not coping and I need support with that? You know, but to actually define burnout, you know, it's so much more than just physical fatigue, than not coping physically, having the bags under the eyes and the fatigue and all of that. It's that emotional not coping too. It's being like, my get up and go has gone up and gone. Like there's nothing left to give here, you know? And becoming so disconnected that even though you might have before been a very empathetic or compassionate person, you actually can't connect with that anymore.
Just withdraw completely.
You don't have it, you don't have it in you to give in that way. And also what can really come with burnout is feeling like no matter what you do, nothing's gonna change, nothing's gonna get better, so why even try? And that's taken further down the line is not going to lead you to a very healthy place.
Well, that's when it becomes depression. That's when it becomes a prolonged state of anxiety, which starts to do physical, emotional, mental damage on a different level. As a kind of a pathway to light, you've been through this process, you were brave enough to put it out there, and thankfully brave enough to also open up that space for other men in particular. I know this is not a male or a female thing. Everyone experiences burnout, but in the context of your life, there was that added element of being a man in that space. How much better do you feel now that you've gone through this, that you were brave enough to take that step, put down a marker in the stand and say, okay, I'm not okay, and now that you've received help, after asking for help, how much better do you feel?
Graham, you know that first day you go to gym, or that first week, and you're just like, but why haven't I been going?
Doing this,
Or the first time you go to therapy and you go, why am I only figuring this out now? You know, it's the one thing I remember. Guys, handing yourself in is not the easiest thing, right? Literally going, I'm handing myself in for 30 days. I've never taken more than a week off in 12 years. For 30 days, I handed myself in, and I was nervous and scared. And honestly speaking, to date, I think it's the best investment I've ever done for myself.
Because you come out
I
more
came out
recharged.
feeling better. And here's the thing, right? People mustn't think that going to a wellness clinic or going for therapy is a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
It's a process.
It's
and
the start
journey.
of
It's the
something,
start
yeah.
of, right? And that's what I learned. I learned how to replace bad habits with good ones, how to create better values. I got myself into a routine that I never had of eating better, of sleeping better, of meditating, of praying, of reading. You know, half the battle is just looking after yourself, you know? And as artists, we don't because our schedules are...
Yeah, you're just on it,
you
yeah.
never
It seems
know,
impossible. It
right?
seems that we're being run by life.
Yes.
Not just artists. I think people often find that they just aren't in control.
So for me, honestly speaking, it's one of the best things I could have ever done, and I feel great. I should have done it sooner.
And you can see it, man.
Because it all starts with raising your hand and saying, I need help.
Yeah.
Here's what's happening. Very, very, few very simple and quick ways that people can cope with burnout.
So I think understanding that burnout is actually a physical thing that's happening in your body. You're experiencing a stress cycle on repeat and constantly. So anything you can do to complete that stress cycle, such as movement, exercise, running, gentle walking, yoga, stretching, breathing, meditating, journaling, doing jumping jacks, dancing in a 30-second dance party to your favorite song, baking, painting, you know, you've got to actually get up and you've got to move in some way to allow your body to burn through the stress. Because once it does, and it doesn't take very long when you allow yourself to do it, you are then back into this place of being able to cope physiologically. And that can also take some of the stigma away, because it's not like you're weak. Actually, your body's not designed to deal with so much stress. So you got to help it out a little bit.
Yeah, completely.
As weird as it sounds, all those things work.
Yeah, 100%, man.
They all, the jumping jacks, the
Yeah.
dances.
Well, you're the best shape I've seen you in, bro. So,
I'm in the gym 6 days a week.
Who knew?
And right? Who knew? And it's honestly, it's therapy.
yeah.
You know,
No, it really
it
is.
really helps me deal with the amount of pressure I go through.
You know what? Identifying burnout symptoms and knowing when to take time out for your mental health, it's very important, as well as learning to set boundaries for your well-being. We can't stress this hard enough.
And remember, you too can join this week's Brave Conversation and stand a chance of winning that 1,000 Rand cash prize with INGRAMS. All you have to do is reply to the competition post on the Expresso Facebook, Twitter or Instagram page and simply tell us how you embrace your motherly flaws. And don't forget to include that hashtag #YourSkinYourBrave. This week's competition closes at midday today, so get on it, please, as quickly as you can. Find all those terms and conditions on expressoshow.com. Thank you so much to both of you.
Do you own your skin? Do you wear it bravely, even when others try to dim its glow? Does it represent your strength, your heritage, or does it express your brave and unconditional love? New look INGRAMS, your skin, your brave.